I'm going to just kind of jump into this. This is something that I guess I've been very interested in, and sort of at the beginning of the pandemic, I sort of followed what was happening with some esports production in the cloud, and then I talked to one of my buddies who does integration for some Silicon Valley companies like Google, and he was doing a lot of audio and video production in the cloud for them. And we started talking about audio solutions and where they were coming from and what capabilities they had. And it got really interesting to say, well, what are the applications for us for sort of virtualizing audio and video production? And we've been on a kind of a trajectory where we're virtualizing production more and more. We realize it doesn't have to be on site. It can be back at a hub or whatever. And there's more and more transport that's happening in the cloud. There's plenty of resources in the cloud. We use the cloud for transmission and things like that, distribution. So why not do production in the cloud? And I guess, Harry, I'll just jump up with you.
Sure.
At Sky. You guys have sort of you've been doing some production for a while. Kind of tell us a little bit about that, what you're doing now in the cloud.
Yeah, sure. So there's two ways which we're using the cloud at the moment for our productions. One's called VPS, Virtual Production Suite, which is a virtualized gallery. And another is VCR, which is a virtual control room. So the virtual control room stuff is essentially our red button content. So we've used it this year to cover the PGA and EPGA Tour Golf, EFL, boxing, and IndyCar. And that's very simply, a couple tracks of audio, comms, and effects. But with our VPS, our Virtual Production Suite, we've used it to cover netball, and last year netball and our coverage of COP26. So I can talk a little bit about netball. Sure. Just quickly. Yeah. So it's simply effects mics at the outside broadcast with ref mics. We take commentary mics from the studio. We have graphics, effects and whooshes, which are already in the cloud, and music in the cloud. And we essentially bring that into our virtual audio mixer instance. And then we use a MIDI controller on the ground to control that. And then, we output our clean feeds and pre-hears to the cloud gallery and back to the outside broadcast as well. And then we have main outs to another instance where it's re-embedded back onto the video after we've mixed it. So the benefits of doing it this way is that we can broadcast more netball because we're not tying up a physical gallery at our studios, and it's greener as well. We don't need to send an OB truck out there, and our crew don't have to travel down there as well. They can work remotely if they want to.
Right. Well, and when you got it started in this, and we'll kind of get into this though, the people like Grass Valley were thinking of this in a sort of master control scenario that you were talking about earlier, and those solutions in the video side have been leveraged to do a sort of limited production control room like you're talking about, but the audio solutions were fairly limited what was available at that time, and you, like a lot of other people, have been using Reaper. And I guess I want to just throw over to Greg. I think Waves was one company that sort of identified, hey, this is an interesting thing, and this is something that we actually have a lot of the pieces and parts to do. And Greg, can you talk about that a little bit of, why is it a good fit for Waves?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Roger. Waves has been doing software audio processing for decades now, and we're not new to broadcast. I know some people are like, "What's Waves doing in broadcast?" Although I think all the audio engineers in the room already know and are using Waves plugins as ways they can get certain types of processing done. And that compatibility with the systems they have now has just expanded to what we were doing already for live. And that was a pure software-based mixer running on a server, a Windows server actually, with all of the processing, all of the DSP taking place in a way that we could see how we could take that if we could break away from what was required on the ground to making it a virtual solution and moving that into the cloud. And so that's how what we now call Cloud MX came about. The core software is based on our eMotion LV1 live audio mixer, which has been used for 6 or 7 years now for live, for touring, for concerts, and AV types of installations. And moving that to the cloud was really a exercise in understanding what the broadcast world was looking for in cloud productions and what the best ways were to bring in the compatibility with the existing sets of tools they were using. So at the time when we first launched, NDI was probably by far the most advanced at getting media streams, I don't want to just say audio, but media streams in general, in and out of the cloud. And so that was something that we aligned with because we felt that in the cloud, the NDI would give us the most compatibility. But going forward, we certainly, are in tune with and see how other protocols are coming in, how other ways of interfacing and following what's happening, not just on audio, but also on the video side, because they are so closely related, especially when you start looking at how does audio follow video for some of the important production decisions that need to be made during the actual live event.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into I want to get into.
I've got instructions, sorry.
All right. Okay. Just mic everybody up. I want to get into the connectivity thing, and I just want to talk a little bit. And Alex said we'll have FPGAs for a long time, and a lot of consoles are based on FPGAs. Your point, you had a console that ran on a Windows server. So, throwing over to you, Tom, it's sort of what do you have to do? Why is it hard to put some consoles in the cloud, and why is it easier for some people? What did you have to do to get there, or what does a manufacturer have to do to get there?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Exactly as you say, the kind of concept of audio processing, I guess historically has been FPGAs or DSPs, and you kind of go, you can get FPGAs in the cloud, but they're kind of bespoke. So you've got the most flexible way is going to be CPU processing, predominantly x86. I guess from SSL's point of view, we had a Tempest engine, that's what we call the processor, on the ground that was running x86 processing, and that's been used for about 10 years in products. But it's still tuned for specific hardware. So to get something that is imperceivable real time, you've kind of got to make a computer behave not quite like a computer. You've got to make it very deterministic. So you've got this concept of tuned for specific hardware audio processing that runs on CPUs. You've then got to completely kind of refactor that to make it more generic, make it more forgiving. And inherently that means buffers. That means giving it time to do processing. But particularly when you're talking about public cloud, you've got a journey there and a journey back. So you've got a bigger concept of time to deal with besides the processing buffers you need. So we've been on this kind of journey behind the scenes, taking our on-the-ground processing engine, called the Tempest engine, and refactoring that to make that public cloud fit. And that's where we are now in terms of proofs of concepts. And that's probably the big stepping stone, if you like, to take a kind of audio processor at scale, so a very large production, and run that as an audio console in the cloud, be it public cloud or private cloud. There's obviously the surface and the control side of what's there. But then Greg kind of mentioned it, the I/O side is very important. And that's not a problem that a single vendor, single manufacturer can solve. That's an industry problem that everyone has to solve together as interoperability. And I think it benefits from looking at it as a kind of the different use case. You might have contribution feeds. There might be different requirements for those from monitoring feeds. So a monitoring feed to the mix position needs to be very quick. That's the kind of primary objective. And then distribution onwards feeds don't necessarily need to be as quick as that monitoring feed. So yeah, NDI, we've run some Dante in the public cloud. We've run some RTP streams that look like AES-67 but are not clocked because they're not can't run multicast in AWS. So they're clocked in a different way. So lots of options there, that's the point.
Well, and those sort of, as you say, there needs to be some collaboration on that stuff. Pete, tell me a little bit about how you guys, you're really not doing any production per se in the cloud. You use the cloud a lot,
Yeah.
and you have a lot of virtualized applications within your data centers too.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, it's very similar to Riot Games. We've got 2 tech hubs which has all our back end. We've got cloud facilities and services that we also pay, but we pay for. We've actually got a lot of our playouts in the cloud, but our main sort of hubs really are the 2 sort of the tech hubs, and all the workspaces, are essentially all connecting back over IP. Just to give you that sort of overview of that. We virtualize quite a lot of things, as you said, and because that's the sort of thing you can run up on scale. And so that was kind of the whole project concept, really, is that we have resources centralized that we can utilize as we want. And again, that's the beautiful thing of cloud as well. But we kind of did it before. I mean, cloud's evolved quite a lot recently. I think COVID obviously helped sort of push that a bit more forward. And there's probably a reason why Riot Games also haven't gone full cloud, because for me, the solutions aren't there completely yet. So, we've got virtualized audio playback software. We've got virtualized operation windows to the back end part. Our edit systems based on virtualization, but it's not all the solutions are there yet in a sensible way, I think. So you can commit, but I think we need a lot of flexibility, and so we haven't really. That's why we probably haven't quite gone 100% cloud. We've got lots of cloud options which we utilize, especially connectivity, and that sort of thing. So, I mean, it's a growing area, but we've really been focusing on the 2110 system and our own internal network.
You've got a lot on your plate right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question, though, and Harry, I guess throw it to you, is like, okay, you've been doing this for a while. How do you see this going? How do you see this expanding, and does it scale up for, higher value production? What do you think?
Yeah, so we've definitely been looking at our tier 1 sports like football and like F1 for inspiration. So a few issues that we still need to solve are 5.1 and Atmos in the cloud. What does that look like?
Okay.
If you have surround sound in the cloud, then can you upmix and downmix in the cloud as well? Another idea is the issue of redundancy as well. Do you have redundancy of the virtual audio mixer itself, or do you have redundant audio transports, which is another thing to think about. Can the virtual audio mixer handle different kinds of audio transports?
I think this is where the kind of philosophy or company's approach is so unique per company at the minute. And you look at everyone doing remote production, the solutions are really different because it's everyone's approach to it. I mean, and this is my own personal view, I think cloud is a really good DR solution because all the risk that's in your data center, you're removing that. But then you still have contribution and distribution issues to contend with. So design is really key, I think, now, right? So the solutions aren't there. You have to really look at each one and go, okay, what's our connectivity? And then how, I think it's really
how do
challenging.
We engineer this
exactly.
for
the case studies are
availability.
There's not a lot of case studies to draw from, I think.
And they become about use cases. They become about design for purpose, not let the technology inform the design. Go, what am I trying to do? Let's pick the right technology for the job. Kind of
right.
flip
But
that way
it's
around.
kind of I think we're all kind of looking at other people and saying, "Oh, you're doing that? All right, ooh, okay, interesting."
Yeah.
You know, it's quite, and there's, you know, you're making mistakes, but that's how you learn, right? And you realise you don't have the same flexibility as you do on a jack field of an OB truck, right? So you have to really plan all those circuits and signals like you've never had to before. So the by the way is quite challenging in that, right? Because you have to really nail
You
that.
have to plan.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, what about, you mentioned surround. If you do these sort of high-value things, there's more channels. What about control surfaces? Are those important? Do you need bigger control surfaces?
Yeah. For our virtual production suite stuff, definitely. For the virtual control room stuff, not so much. That's just 2 channels, so we can kind of leave everything up to a multi-skilled operator for that. But yeah, for our virtual production suite, I think the controller is more important than the GUI you have, because if you want an A1 to come in and mix the show, you know, you don't really want them trying to dial in like EQ and compression with a mouse, you know. It's quite clunky, you know, and I've done that as well on some of our productions, and you can easily overshoot, you know, on the makeup gain by dragging the mouse too far. So, you know, I think that is really important, but you can make it you know, intuitive and similar to a broadcast desk. But then I think one of the beauties of cloud is that it's mainly software, so you can scale it up quite quickly. So if you bring in, you know, a big broadcast style, you know, service, then you can't put one of those in everyone's homes, you know. So I think the solution has to be something, you know, quite compact and scalable.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying about sort of ethos. So you're trying to keep the control room, but remove the back end to the cloud, or you're trying to do remote production where people are working at home. And I think they're not the same thing. They're completely
but control
different, you know.
surfaces don't have the thousands of knobs that they used to have on them. I mean, is there a sweet spot, Tom, Greg? Is there, you know, what are your customers or potential customers telling you?
It depends on the application. So we can ship a piece of software on a computer and a fader tile to someone's house. Similarly, we could have, if we really want to, a 96 fader surface connected to the cloud DSP instance, and both of those could work together, but they fit different requirements. So I think the ideal is you can do both, which we kind of can. So
I think the beauty of the cloud is being said here is not only is the scalability in the processing, but if there's a way to incorporate that scalability into what is actually deployed, so that one engineer is perfectly fine after everything's set up, he can run his whole event on 8 faders versus the other guy that needs, you know, something that he can scale up to 32, 96 faders if he has the room or space to do it. But being able to support all those different things based on what each company is looking for and, you know, what the business is really driving, because that flexibility is key, that you don't need to invest in the same hardware that you were using before, but instead you're now moving not only your processing to the cloud, but also you have that much more flexibility, much more capability with what you actually need for each operator.
Budgets, and like when you've got a contract and it's only for a fixed period of time, an install's expensive, right? So just pulling to cloud resources for a period of time is very cost effective. So that, for me, is the real
We're
winner.
back to somebody mixing home. If my star mixer wants to mix at home in his or her spare room, then really there's not a lot of footprint there. Even if you have a whole console, I'm sure there's a solution to say send the control surface out. There's an Ethernet cable. There's an audio interface for monitors. How much stuff do you need? I mean, is it so unreasonable that somebody or a service provider might provide the control resource that I'm a mixer, but I'm going to mix at home? Is that?
yeah, I mean, you could get to a point where people rent surfaces but nothing else. Like the infrastructure's managed by a different party. The business model has changed a little bit. I guess that's another factor in this. It might shift around, and you guys are best placed to describe that more than manufacturer.
And I can't talk on behalf of Warner Brothers Discovery, but for me, the real...
It used to be a mixer.
Exactly. But
I remember.
I know, COVID changed people's minds a bit, and don't get me wrong, I think it's good, people can work remotely if necessary, but I still, there's value in being in the same room, right, or in being in the same facilities, speaking to your commentators, speaking to your production team. So I don't personally want to reinvent television, so I don't really want to keep everyone remotely all the time. It's benefit if you can, for a variety of reasons, you've got flexibility. But TV, I think, kind of remain TV for a long period of time. I have no interest in changing it. But the back end is where, for me, is the real key. You might not know if your console's in the cloud or not, and that's the real key. Oh, you need some more space? We'll just put a console there, but it's on the cloud instance. For effectively, that's where I kind of really want to see it to go. Remote working also cool, but that's for me. It's not my prime focus, personally.
Yeah, I would say that it's not really on our short-term roadmap, remote working, but we've already ticked that box. We've already had a remote operator mixing on the netball over lockdown, and this is an important point because he was actually at risk, so he couldn't come into work. So I think that having the option to remote work makes it the cloud allows us to be more inclusive to everyone.
Well, and I would think too, even within the facility, if you're virtualizing all that, then the audio control room inherently has a smaller footprint. If you take that same package that could be at somebody's house, it also can be in an office. It's not a highly developed technical space, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
So what else do we need? You mentioned, Greg, connectivity. Do you guys feel like there's progress? I mean, we talked a little bit about Alex talking about bringing 2110 level 30 into unicast. What are the solutions there? We can't keep shoving audio on NDI like.
I mean,
Yeah.
there are many solutions. And I
There are.
guess my point earlier was define the specific problem of the connection you're trying to achieve and pick the right solution for that. So in proof of concept and tests we've done, contribution from a venue has often come within a video stream with SRT, that kind of stuff. Down to the monitor position, we've gone, we need to really control that, and that needs to be as quick as possible. We've done various things, one of them including an RTP stream that we kind of manage, and we've got both ends of that, so that's kind of okay. And then the bit out to the wider world is where we've previously used things like NDI, we've used Dante a bit, and I should caveat that, but that's all in public cloud, so that's in a network you're not managing versus Pete's scenario, which is a network you are managing, where 2110, that's the kind of thing we do on the ground today.
And if you're not managing it, then you've got clocking issues. There's all, there's lots of factors. I think that we're going to have challenges, especially in the wider cloud solution. And I know I've actually saw a few things that looking at there will be solutions for that, but they're not quite there on the market yet for that complete solution of interfacing from all these different venues and companies and markets, because you wouldn't, normally have frame synchronizers or some sort of reclocking devices if you were interfacing with another broadcaster. I guess we have to sort of develop that kind of same philosophy, but in the cloud,
Yeah, I think that synchronization, especially if you start having remote contributors from different areas globally, having a close enough synchronization between those that you're not constantly chasing clock between all of them is another area where the protocols might be there, but it might not sync the way you want it to without somebody manually, being on top of it the entire event.
Yeah. Well, and there's an issue of, Tom, you started saying.
It's kind of close to the point where the technology can provide a live production at scale in the cloud. It kind of needs a broadcaster to go, this is what I really want to do, and that will inform the development choices for us, definitely, I assume for Greg as well, of what gets higher up the roadmap and what's implemented first.
But if somebody said, I want to do it, do you have any anxiety? Do you say, oh, how do we solve this or that? Or do you say, yeah, I think we can probably get it?
We could probably do it. There'd be a discussion about the specifics of exactly what they want to do with other bits of kit, and you solve that problem.
Well, and that's like things like we mentioned, mixing at the edge, self-hears and stuff like that. Are there good solutions for that?
Yeah. I mean, you have to deploy some processing at the edge, and that could be another large engine that we deploy on the ground. It could be a smaller box, a smaller commentary system that has remote control of it. Yeah, I'm sure you guys do this kind of thing for any
Yeah.
remote production.
Because effectively all our studios are remote by default, so we've had to factor that in from day one, because all the tech hubs are where all the actual DSP processing happens. So then we have to send the signals back again to the actual site. So it's kind of the same solution throughout our whole company, which is fine, but it just needed to be pretty robust. So there are things you can do that with, and obviously APIs and control data that you can integrate as well. So there are solutions. It's not the case studies.
RP1 works
Yeah, exactly,
pretty
yeah.
well. You got friends up there, you know?
And understanding what's usable, right? Because, I mean, we're not going to get to 0 millisecond latency when you're talking cloud, but,
But is latency the most important thing, or is synchronicity the most important thing?
it's a combination. It really is.
Depends who
neither.
you are.
Yeah.
If you're the audio operator, you want it quick. If you're in
Yeah.
a production gallery, you
Well,
want it in sync.
you want it quick relative to the video you're looking at. But, I mean, we delay things all the time because camera feeds are delayed, so we're not really in real time. Harry?
But you're in real time in reference to where your processing is.
You
rather
need to
than
be
real.
close to the processing, and you need to be synchronized with what you're seeing.
Yeah, I guess, seeing as the processing's all in the cloud, whether you're taking audio from the OB or whether you're taking the audio from a studio right next to you, it's going to be going up to the cloud and back down, so you've got to treat every area like it's an OB, even if you're in a studio.
You've got to compromise, right? You've got to find that line where you've got to say, okay, like we got remote commentary solutions, but also as soon as it hits a tech hub, it's going to hit some sort of latency or some processing time, to get back and forth. But our network's quite powerful, so we've reduced those times to get it super quick. But we've made a decision that's acceptable. It's
Right.
not perfect, but we've made that line and gone, it wasn't acceptable, and we had to force manufacturers to bring that closer, and then we said, okay, we can cope with that level. So it's finding that line, I think.
Well, if you just had those virtualized commentators we saw earlier, they could just be in the cloud, you'd be fine, right? Netball, who cares, right? Harry, what do you think? Are you scared if we say we need to do Premier League, it's part of our strategic? What do you-
I guess I'm not worried about the latency aspect, because we produce
Manage that.
We produced the Australian Grand Prix from London,
Right.
so I think that we'll always overcome that. In terms of fader count, track count, stuff like that, that's something that will be improved as well. I think we've got to be important not to move too fast with this and move into the cloud, because at what point does that become destructive towards our production? So I think as we scale everything up, we'll be paying close attention to our output and making sure that the productions are running as smoothly as we want, because there's going to be a lot of changes for all our operators involved. It's going to be it's a whole new world.
But do you think football's quite a good one, because in the sense that you've got connectivity at grounds, right? It's not like you're going to a remote site where you have to pay for some sort of connectivity with fibre that's not installed.
You're
anywhere.
already remote.
Yeah.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I actually think that's probably one where you could probably do it. I think, but if the solutions are there on that side.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, okay, yeah. If you had a big enough track count, another thing would be getting that remote mixer solution in the cloud as well. That would be something that we'd need to think about.
On the ground.
On the
RP1.
grounds, but you need that to interface with the cloud. So there needs to be an element inside the cloud which is talking to the mixer solution. And all the solutions we see at the moment, that we're seeing are software based. So whether that's a piece of hardware on the ground, or
Well,
whether
you
it's
need
just
a
another
piece of
computer.
hardware that interfaces to whatever the Hydra is or whatever the 2110 is, and that needs to be doing DSP right there if it's Premier League.
And if I put my management hat on, then
Yes.
you've got to think about support.
You have a management hat.
Yeah,
now,
so
people,
yeah, I
I'm
know.
aware.
And so there's all those other elements. So yeah, just because you can, how do you the actual reality of that in terms of delivery? Especially with SLAs involved and that sort of thing. There's so many factors. Again, it's so it's an interesting time. I'm really interested who's going to make these big bold moves because
Here
there's
he
lots of
is.
factors. Yeah.
There he is. I can
I
tell.
do, yeah.
He's
I'd like
just
to say that, yeah,
playing it cool.
training is a big one for us. So you have, you know, the issue of if everything's based in the cloud and it's software, you know, how quickly does software develop and update? You know, you get updates for software. Say if you were to look at a physical desk on the ground, you know, you buy it, you use it for 10 or more years, you know, that changes. An operator can come in and operate that and knows how to use that. But with software, you know, constantly changes. And also the depth of the knowledge that an A1's going to need now to operate something in the cloud. Yes, you can have like a very simple GUI that anyone can use. But what if something goes wrong in the back end? What if, you know, like a firewall is put on like a corporate network
Firewall,
and now
yeah.
your MIDI port isn't like usable, you know?
I bet
A1,
MIDI
I'd wanna
is your
be able
biggest
to-
problem, actually.
It is, yeah, it is quite a big problem, yeah.
And working in big corporations, you know,
Yeah.
firewalls are like,
Yeah.
they're strict and they do update and
Yeah.
they don't always give you a lot of warning. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. That support model, again, is unestablished, I think, on this kind of scale.
Needs to be established. And once
Exactly.
it's normalized, you have rules just for other stuff. Well, I think we're going to cut it short there, actually. This has been great. I hope we continue to have this conversation, and I'll be really interested to see what you guys do on the production side and what kind of solutions Waves and Tom and other people kind of provide. So, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.